Good evening, Dungeon Masters, I'm Baron Darop. Nintendo's 1998 release of Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is widely agreed to be one of the greatest video games ever produced. While the tight gameplay, phenomenal puzzle construction, and the innovative use of the, at the time, new 3D graphics technology all contributed to the game's success, it's the engaging story arc that truly carries the game. In fact, the cohesive setup and delivery of the game's RPG narrative is woven so perfectly, we can use it as a design pattern for our own D&D campaign creation. For those of us who may need a refresher, Ocarina's story, at least from Link's perspective, is that Link almost immediately learns he is destined to be the hero of time and must run around collecting spiritual gemstones in order to open a portal to the Temple of Light, gain access to the Triforce, and use it to overcome the prophetically evil Ganondorf before he can bring misery to Hyrule. After collecting the spiritual stones, but still being too young to rise to the challenge, Link is trapped in a time stasis for 7 years until he's old enough to tango with Ganondorf directly. Unfortunately for Hyrule, Ganondorf uses those 7 years to spread his corruption across the land and pervert the temples where 7 sages draw their magic power needed by Link for his direct confrontation with Ganondorf. After being released from time stasis, Link sets out to remedy the problem and cleanses the various temples so the sages can reassert their authority. After all this, Link finally confronts Ganondorf mano a mano and saves the land of Hyrule. This epic quest makes for a stellar video game story, but in order to see how its construction is useful for D&D campaign design, we have to reanalyze the story through the antagonist's perspective. So again, let's rethink this storyline from Ganondorf's point of view. As a young man, Ganondorf learns that he will be a great figure of prophecy, and through that prophecy, learns how to gain access to the Triforce in the Temple of Light. Knowing the two other people related to the prophecy are only young children, Zelda and Link, he knows that he must act quickly to solidify his power before the children are old enough to act. Ganondorf and his cronies begin their plot by making demands of the Great Deku Tree, King Darunia, and King Zora, the holders of these spiritual stones, needed to gain access to the Triforce, but negotiations obviously fail. Ganondorf then curses each of their domains as a setup for his Plan B. Ganondorf performatively introduces himself to the King of Hyrule, knowing from the prophecy that the two impressionable children, Link and Zelda, will be present, thus spurning the naive kids into action. Successfully duped, Link fixes each problem Ganondorf created, the spider, lizard, and parasite infestations, in exchange for each of the spiritual stones. Once Link and Zelda bring the stones and titular Ocarina of Time together, Ganondorf simply follows Link into the Temple of Light, gains access to the Triforce, corrupts the 7 sages' temples, and begins his utter domination of Hyrule, all while having knowledge Link is too young to become the hero of time and stop him. It's from this perspective that Ocarina's story arc lays the blueprint for a D&D campaign design pattern. Everywhere Child Link goes, there's a problem that needs to be solved. Problems created by Ganondorf and his cronies. To reinforce these problems, Ganondorf establishes the status quo, that is, the domination of Hyrule. This status quo is the overarching issue that all the smaller problems are related to, and must be managed over the course of the game. In our own campaign creation, this design pattern can be replicated by creating each location with problems that all link back in some way to the main antagonist. For example, imagine a vampire lord who wishes to alter the orbit of the moon to make eclipses longer and more frequent, all to enable some vampire daywalking shenanigans. To do this, the vampire might need a few items for a long-forgotten ritual: a tome describing the ancient rite, a ceremonial knife buried in a crypt, and maybe the descendant of a particular exotic animal needed for sacrifice. Each of these requirements create problems related to the vampire lord wherever these objects are found. A master librarian might have gone catatonic thanks to trying to stop the vampire from taking control of the book, and a local healer needs ingredients for a potion to wake him back up. Elsewhere, some undead shamble about a graveyard and attack villagers and livestock where the ceremonial knife was exhumed from a crypt. The knife was a part of a purification enchantment, and some other kind of undead cleansing magic is now needed to replace what the knife's disappearance has triggered. Lastly, the exotic animal breeder might have had all of her cages opened by a vampire-hired dog napper, who made off with her prized exotic dog breed, but she also needs to figure out where the rest of her animals have gone. As a result, each location has a problem which ties back to the main antagonist's status quo issue. The Zelda series in general is well known for its quest items and MacGuffins, but in Ocarina of Time especially, the placement of these MacGuffins is something to learn from. Every location in Ocarina of Time contains multiple items, as well as multiple references to other locations and their items. Further still, each of these items is required to continue on with the story. Once an adult, for example, Link needs a hookshot from the graveyard in Kakariko Village to gain access to the Forest Temple in Lost Woods. He needs iron boots in Zora's Domain to gain access to the Water Temple in Lake Hylia, and needs the Lens of Truth at the bottom of Kakariko's Well to safely cross the Gerudo Desert. Furthermore, NPCs are constantly dropping hints about events or other people elsewhere in the world, inadvertently sending Link on a wild goose chase around Hyrule. The placement of all these quest items causes Link to visit every location in the game world, and it inadvertently means that wherever Link is happens to be the correct location in order to progress the story. There's always a hint, clue, or quest item that directs Link to another part of the game world. To return to our vampire creation example, the solution of each problem should also be scattered among the various locations where the disparate problems are occurring. The flowers and herbs needed for the Master Librarian's potion might only grow near that other village's graveyard, where the undead are roaming about. A magic item needed to stop the undead, since the ceremonial knife has gone missing, might be part of some jewelry regularly worn by the dog breeder's best customer, who's furious her prize stud has gone missing. The exotic animal breeder might need a book describing the natural habitat of some of her runaway animals in order to figure out where they went, a book locked up in a trapped and warded section of the already mentioned library. By keeping your game world tightly interconnected in this way, the players will always find that wherever they are is where they need to be in order to advance their story. If you'd like to help me make more content like this in the future, please consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a channel member. Thanks for watching, Dungeon Masters, and until next time, good night.